You know how everyone says family comes first? Yeah, well, sometimes that's exactly the problem. Today we're talking about 3 stories submitted by Korean women online that start with good intentions but end in deception. A mother-in-law, a holiday, and a daughter-in-law who just wants to make it through the new year without losing her mind or her baby. We have stories about tradition, expectation, and how sometimes love can feel a lot like control, especially when you're told to endure because, well, that's what good women do. So grab your snacks, your hot beverages, and take a seat because the drama is delicious. Hello, friends and family. This is Megan Moon, aka 저는 미국 사람입니다. Let's jump right into the first story, which is my mom-in-law got pregnant. So this first story was submitted by Yuna. We actually have a name to this story, which I'm kind of bummed about because you guys know I just like calling everyone Mrs. Kim because usually the stories are anonymous. Let's see what Yuna has to say. She starts by saying, when people talk about marriage, they often imagine soft mornings and shared laughter, the gentle rhythm of 2 people building a life together. But sometimes love isn't destroyed by fights or distance. It's destroyed by deception that moves quietly into your home. My name is Yuna, I'm 31 and I live in Seoul, and this is the story of how a single lie, whispered in the name of family, nearly took everything from me. I had been married for 6 months. After 3 years of dating, my husband and I finally said, I do. Our newlywed apartment was tiny, just a 2-room place in Jaemyeongdong. But to me, it was everything because we built it together, one small piece at a time. Every weekend, we'd visit furniture shops, holding hands and arguing over curtains or cushions. 그게 우리만의 행복이었어요. That was our happiness. Evenings were my favorite. We'd sit on the sofa together after work. We'd be watching dramas. We'd be sharing fried chicken and laughing about nothing. I thought love was just that simple until we received a call that changed everything. We had just ordered chicken and we were talking about our weekend plans when the phone buzzed. The screen flashed, 엄마, mother. He answered, 여보세요? Then his face froze. 뭐라고요? What did you say? You're pregnant? So Yuna said, I thought I'd misheard. Pregnant? His mother? She was 54. How could that be even possible? When he hung up the phone, he took my hand. It was cold and trembling. He said, 여보, my mom is pregnant. The doctor says it's a high-risk pregnancy and she shouldn't be alone. So I stared at him, trying to make sense of everything. My mother-in-law had been divorced for 10 years. And I had never heard that she had anyone new in her life. So I was just like, so what are you saying? He hesitated and said, I think we should bring her here to live with us, just until she gives birth at least. It would be maybe just 7 months or so. But I was thinking, 7 months? That's nearly a year of our first newlywed year gone. But how could I say no? Because she was pregnant. So I swallowed my unease and said, 알겠어요. 멋있죠. All right, let's bring her in to live with us in our house. My mother-in-law arrived 2 days later, and I vividly remember the sound of the taxi door closing and the image of seeing her drag 3 huge suitcases across the ground. She also had big boxes, and I was thinking to myself, that's so much luggage for someone who said she'd just stay for a while. When she arrived, I said hello, and I said, 어머니, 괜찮으세요? Mother, are you okay? She sighed dramatically. 입덧이 너무 심해서 죽겠어. My morning sickness is so bad I can't even smell food without gagging. But Yuna says, something felt off because her face looked very healthy and she was carrying her luggage all by herself, like all of that luggage. That's not what someone who was weak with morning sickness would do at all. When my mother-in-law arrived, she glanced around the apartment. So this is your newlywed home? It's smaller than I thought. 2 rooms, right? Yes, 어머님, we have 2 rooms. The big one is our bedroom, and the small one is the study. Mother-in-law says, then I'll take the big room. I'm pregnant. I need space to rest, you know? You 2 can move into the small room. Yuna says, for a second, I couldn't breathe. Our room, our carefully decorated, love-filled space, gone? With 1 sentence. My husband tried to object, but his mother's voice turned sharp. 임신한 사람한테 그 정도 배려도 못해? You can't even show that much care to a pregnant woman? She guilt tripping, y'all. See, I don't like this story already. Too entitled. Like, two people have to go in a smaller room and be uncomfortable. Like, there's no reason why you can't carefully rest in a small room, you know? She's just being demanding and being ridiculous. So anyway, Yuna says after her mom-in-law's outburst, she just smiles and said, 네, 어머니, 금방 쓰세요. Yes, mother, please take the big room. That night, we moved our things into the small room. The bed barely fit. Then mother-in-law took our wedding photo down from the walls and just tried to make the space her own. Yuna said, I wanted to cry, but I told myself to endure, because she's pregnant, She needs to rest. Let's just go with what she wants. We don't want to cause stress for the baby. Another thing you should know is in certain cultures that are very superstitious, they believe that you have to treat the mother well, because if the mother is stressed in any way, regardless of how irrational she might be, it will put stress on the baby and stress on the body. So you just go along with whatever pregnant women want. And there are other superstitions too, which I encountered. And that's if you're pregnant, you shouldn't watch bad things. One time my friends were going to a burlesque show. It was like either a burlesque show or some kind of drag show. Either way, at the burlesque shows here, there's always a few drag queens that come out. And it's burlesque, right? It's a bit raunchy, but it's fun. I love the performances. My friends were like, no, you are pregnant. You can't expose your baby to those rated R contents. And I was like, but they're in my tummy. They won't see it. But still, we're like, no. I was a bit salty about that. But when it comes to movies, like, you can't go see any rated R movies. You can't even hear bad news. So there was some bad news in the family, and like, no one would tell me. Well, in general, I think it's a good rule to not stress pregnant women out too much. People go a little bit over the top. I definitely think there is some truth to that. I think if you're overly stressed and you're filled with negative emotions, then yes. But if you're going to a burlesque show that you enjoy, you're going there, you're having a good time, that positive energy is going to the baby. It's about our enjoyment. But I do agree with the keeping of the bad news away, like things that would overly stress them out, as long as it's not something that they would feel betrayed by and lied to about. You know what I mean? Anyway, they don't want to stress out their mother-in-law, so they go with her demands. They allow her to take the wedding photo down. I don't know why you would need to take a wedding photo down off the walls, though. Yuna says, at first, things were fine. She stayed mostly in her room. I went to work as usual, but slowly, little things just didn't add up. Yuna says the first thing was I never saw a doctor's note. She's not taking any prenatal vitamins. She doesn't have any sort of medication. That is pretty suspicious, especially if she's that old. You really got to make sure you're crossing all your T's and dotting your I's. So Yuna says she asked her mother-in-law, 어머니, 병원으로 언제 가세요? When is your next checkup at the doctor? But my mother-in-law just waved me off. 괜찮아. 내가 알아서 할게. I'm okay. I'll go by myself. Don't worry about it. But Yuna says her appetite was enormous. For someone who's complaining of morning sickness all the time, she ate better than both of us combined. Then she would get these random phone calls. She would go and spend hours on the phone. Her voice was bright, she was laughing, but one evening I heard her say, just wait, soon it'll be under my name. Yuna says, my heart dropped. Under her name? What name? What is she even talking about? Then a few weeks later, a package arrived. The sender was a law office and the receiver was my mother-in-law. I hesitated, but the unease was too strong. When I opened the envelope, my hands shook. It was a property transfer authorization form from me to her, which means that what she was talking about was our apartment, our home. She was trying to steal our apartment from us, and the apartment is in my name, which is why it was from me to her. On these forms, every detail was filled out. Literally all that it needed was my signature. Just then, everything clicked. The pregnancy, the move, the manipulation. I showed the papers to my husband that night, and he went pale. He said, 저 정말 몰랐어. I didn't know. So then I shouted, she's trying to steal our house and you didn't know? He begged me to calm down, but I couldn't. So we confronted her together. At first she laughed. 그거 혹시 몰라서 준비한 거야. 만약 내가 출산하다가 죽으면 어쩌라고. It's just in case something happens when I give birth. But that doesn't make sense. Why would you need their house if you die during birth? Where's the logic in that? Like, I don't know. Some people's logic is just insane. Like, I'm like, did you not check with a friend first? But like asking them, run it by 5 people and see what they say. Yuna says, my mother-in-law's face hardened. I'm the one that protected this house. It's mine. That doesn't even really make sense in Korean. Like, protected it what? Like, what? So the argument between us exploded, and my mother-in-law, I guess, couldn't handle it anymore. So she clutched her stomach and pretended to be in pain. Ow, my stomach. But my husband believed her and he panicked. And Yuna said, it was at that moment that I realized that I was completely alone in this house. So Yuna says, I have got to do something about this. So the next morning, when my mom-in-law went out, I searched her room. I searched under her bed and I found a small box. It was filled with papers and notes. One had a phone number for a clinic. It was a 산부인과, which is a gynecologist women's clinic. So I called, hello, this is the women's clinic. Yuna said, I'd like to confirm a patient's record. Insert mother-in-law's name. After a pause, the nurse said, 죄송하지만 그런 환자분 없습니다. I'm sorry, but we don't have a record of such a patient. Yuna said my hands went cold. She was never pregnant. And that evening, I heard her on the phone, again laughing softly. 그 여자가 부르고 사인만 하면 돼. She doesn't know anything. She just needs to sign. That's all. I need to get her to sign the paper. We can say it's something like a hospital waiver for the birth or something. Then she went on to say, 엄마가 임신했다고 하니까 진짜 믿더라고. They really believe that I'm pregnant. She's kikiing on the phone with whoever that is. Yuna said my whole body shook. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. First of all, who is her friend that's going along with this story? All your friends, throw them away. So Yuna said that night she brought the documents and faced her mother-in-law that night. Threw all the papers down and said, you know what? You can take these papers back. You won't need them. My mother-in-law freezes. And then I went on to say, I called the hospital. You were never even a patient there. You lied. Then the room went silent. Even the clock ticking on the wall sounded so loud. It was so quiet. My husband then turned to his mom and looked horrified and said, 엄마, 정말이야? Is this true, Mom? At first, mother-in-law denied it, of course, but then she started crying and grabbing her son's arm. I'm so sorry, I made a mistake. I'm just old and I don't have anywhere to go. You should just think of it as your filial duty. Yuna said she laughed bitterly. So, lies are parental fealty? My husband just sat there speechless, and when she finally whispered, I wasn't pregnant, I felt the air went out of the room. So I just packed my bag and said, you know what? I'm going to my mother's house. You can choose me or her, and then I walked out. After about 4 months passed, my husband called one evening and said, okay, my mom finally left. She's gone. Please come back. 4 months? No, throw the whole man away. I could see if it was like 2 days because she needed to arrange stuff, but she has a place that is not gone. Like, it'd be different if her lease was up or something and she's between places, but she has a place to go to. I don't know why she wouldn't go back right away. What in the hell is she doing for 4 months? And why the hell are you okay with your wife being gone for 4 months? That should be an immediate, no, Mom, you go back to your house and I'm gonna go get my wife from her parents' house today. 4 months went by and he gone. I cannot with these people. But Yuna asked her husband, why would I come back? And he said, because I was wrong. I knew that something was off, but I just didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe that my mom would lie. And then, here's the nail in the coffin, though. He actually admitted that he had known for weeks, but had stayed silent. He heard his mom on the phone with her loud-ass conversations, talking to her friend about how she's lying and she's not pregnant and she's going to steal the house. He had heard weeks before, but stayed silent. Yuna said that was the last piece of the betrayal I needed to hear. So a week later, we signed the divorce papers. Yeah, girl, because remember, she confronted her husband and he was acting like, oh, I don't know. But like, he knew weeks before. Even she did, but he still didn't say anything. Are you that afraid of a little old woman that you couldn't tell your wife she's lying and get her kicked out and then let her stay for 4 more months before you realize the error of your ways? Absolutely not. They had only been married for 6 months, and she said, my 6 months of marriage was undone by lies. 2 months later, she returned to the apartment. She said her home looked unfamiliar. The furniture, the smell of mom-in-law still lingered. Yeah, because she was there for 4 months. She was there longer than you were there. right? Because remember, they'd been married 6 months. The mom-in-law was there for 4. They'd only been married for a month or 2 before she came in, right? She replaced the curtains. She bought new sheets. Just felt more at peace, she said. Sometimes I still think about her, the woman who lied about giving life in order to take mine apart. And she heard through the grapevine that even her son stopped visiting her because of all the shenanigans she had. She said sometimes her husband will randomly text, I'm sorry, please take me back. But she says she doesn't reply. Good for you, girl, because, oof. Forgiveness does not mean that you have to take someone back. I do think we need to forgive everyone because we shouldn't hold on to those negative emotions. Like, take them, release them, let them go through meditation or something if you have to. But letting go of those negative feelings you had towards someone doesn't mean that you have to bring them back in your life. I think a lot of people think that's what forgiveness is. Forgiveness means we're going to stay together. Forgiveness just means you're releasing those negative emotions. But if you know the type of person that that person is, and you know that they're likely to do that thing again and they haven't really changed, then you don't need to put yourself back in the situation for them to keep repeating the same shenanigans that they're up to. She said that's what she learned. But anyway, let's move on to story 2. And this story is called The Price of Care. And this one did not have a name, so we get to call her Mrs. Kim. Mrs. Kim says, they say nurses carry the weight of other people's pain, but no one tells you how heavy it becomes when the ones hurting you are called family. I've been a nurse for 8 years now, working at a university hospital in Seoul. Every day I smile for my patients. 괜찮으세요? 힘내세요. Are you okay? Stay strong. Even when my legs are aching and my heart feels hollow, I keep smiling because that's what a nurse does. We have to comfort our patients even when we're the ones breaking inside. But unfortunately for me, when I get home, there's no one waiting to comfort me. When I come home from work, my husband doesn't even look up from his game to say hello. I'd wish that he would just, when I came in, say, "Oh, 왔어? Oh, you're home?" Mrs. Kim says the silence of that apartment was louder than any hospital alarm. But then she goes on to say, the beginning of the pain that I was in was to start in autumn, 3 years into our marriage, when my sister-in-law called with good news. She was pregnant. After 5 years of marriage, she finally conceived, and the whole family was thrilled. My mother-in-law called and cried on the phone that night. My daughter is finally gonna make me a grandmother. Mrs. Kim says, I was happy for them, like truly. Of course, anybody would, right? She goes on to say, my sister-in-law and I got along very well, and I thought maybe through pregnancy we could get even closer. But I had no idea how wrong I was, because from that moment, my mother-in-law started treating her pregnancy like my responsibility. At first, she would say things to me like, 너도 이제 슬슬 준비해야지. You should start preparing too. I thought she meant for me to start preparing to have a baby. But no, she meant I should prepare for my sister-in-law's baby. A month after the pregnancy news, my sister-in-law started calling. 언니, 임신해서 몸이 무거워. 약국에서 비타민 좀 사다 줄 수 있어? I feel a bit heavy from pregnancy. Can you buy me some vitamins from the pharmacy? So of course, I would say yes to those things. She was family. But soon the requests started multiplying. 언니, 병원 같이 가줄래? Can you come to my doctor's appointment with me? I'm so nervous to go alone. Do you not have a husband who would take off work to go with you? Because even my husband, as busy as he is, was there. And when I went to the doctor's office, practically every woman, regardless of the time of day, was there with their husband. So I don't know why your husband can't come. Or why wouldn't you ask your mom to go with you? Why is it the nurse that comes with you to the doctor's office? There are doctors and nurses there. You don't need a nurse to come with you to see a nurse. Then she would ask more things like, 언니, I'm having a hard time with morning sickness. Can you make me some seaweed soup, please? 언니, 청소 좀 도와줄래? 너무 힘들어. Can you come to my house and help me clean up? I'm so exhausted. So she's just becoming your personal slave. Why isn't your mother helping you? Typically, the moms would be the ones who would want to participate. Mrs. Kim said, every time she asked me, I said yes. Even after my long night shift, when my legs felt like lead and my eyes burned, I went because she's pregnant and she's family. Every time I wanted to say no, but I always felt guilty about not saying no. So one day I finally told my husband, you know what? I'm so exhausted of taking care of her. But he just shrugged and said, 가족이잖아. 임신한 사람한테 그럴 수 없지. She's family. How can you say no to a pregnant woman like that? I'd be like, sir, you go with her to the doctor's appointments. You go clean up her house. Okay, that's your sister. Why I gotta do it? Ask your mama. Or why don't we make a rotation? Also, she has a mother-in-law and other sister-in-laws who might want to help out too, right? But Mrs. Kim said that sentence became a knife, one that carved away at my peace, little by little. Months passed by, my sister-in-law's belly grew, and with it, so did my resentment. Oh, you should just say no. Like if you feel yourself start resenting someone, what I noticed to happen is people will get to a boiling point and then suddenly explode and they grow to hate that person and then cut ties with that person. But I actually think you should be more upset with yourself, because if you've reached your limit and you can't do anything, or you realize that what they're asking you to do is not sustainable to the point where you are growing hatred, then you got to cut it off early before you get to the point where you hate them. Because essentially, if someone's asking you to do something and you keep saying yes, then they think that you're okay doing it. So they're going to keep asking you to do it. So you got to set that boundary up, right? So then she said, at family gatherings, my mother-in-law's tone turned colder. She said, in our family, the daughter-in-laws are the center of the family who take care of everything. But I guess daughter-in-laws nowadays just want to live comfortably and don't want to do that. Basically saying, you should be doing more. So Mrs. Kim said, I smiled politely and bowed my head and said, I'll try to do better. But inside, my chest tightened. I was always trying. But when the topic of postnatal care came up, I assumed my sister-in-law would go to a care center. You guys know I went to one. Almost every Korean goes to them. People will stay typically for about 2 weeks to receive postnatal care and help with the baby, etc., to sort of rest and recuperate before you're thrown into motherhood. It's a nice transition into motherhood, I would say, if you don't plan on breastfeeding, because they keep the baby overnight so you can sleep, and of course they feed them formula. It's kind of one of the reasons why the breastfeeding rates in Korea are like the lowest, because when the baby's first born, they're not with the mom on the mom's body all the time, just like a couple times throughout the day. So that was the one thing that I didn't like about it. So Mrs. Kim thought her sister-in-law would go to a 산후조리원, but she said my mother-in-law had other plans. Why would we waste money on a postpartum care facility? You're a nurse. How about you take off time and take care of her at home? So she said I laughed weakly, thinking she was joking. But she was not joking. She said, Mom, my work as a nurse isn't the same as postnatal care, and I have a job. So mom-in-law was like, just take time off. Is your job more important than my daughter? I'd be like, yes. But I guess Mrs. Kim is sort of a people pleaser. So she said her words sort of pierced through her and she felt guilty about it. So she said she told her husband about it, and he said quietly, 엄마 말도 일리가 있어. I think my mom has a point. You're a nurse and she's family. So why don't you take care of her? Why are you making such a big deal out of it and make it so complicated? Oh no, throw the whole man away, because they want you to quit your job for 2 weeks to take care of your sister for free when there are services for that. Even in Korea, they have services that the government provides called like 산후도우미, which is like a lady who comes to your house. She does the cleaning, she does the cooking, she does the baby care, and if you pay a little extra, she'll even stay overnight and help you for nighttime feedings and stuff. And the government subsidizes it. So basically, you get 2 weeks for almost free, like of just a woman in your house to help out for everything. So even if you don't do 산후조리원, the postpartum care facility, you could still sign up for that free lady to come to your house and do everything and help you out afterwards. You don't need a nurse to be there, especially someone that has their own job. Why do they think your job is not important? Mrs. Kim says, that night I couldn't sleep. But for the first time, I asked myself, am I only valuable when I'm serving them? I would say the answer is probably yes. Because like based on your personality now, it seems like you are the one who always does the favors for people and sort of feel guilty if you can't help people and are easily sort of guilted into doing things. So probably that's the relationship that they have with you, right? We ask her for a favor and she says yes. And maybe up until now, you've never said no. So they just assume you're always going to say yes. And that's sort of what they base their relationship with you off of. So I think probably that's why they even would dare to ask you to do something in the first place, you know? Then she says, a few days later, my sister-in-law called again and said, Anni, so I heard from mom that you said you're going to help out after birth. I'm so relieved. I'm so excited. She said, my sister-in-law sounded so certain, as if my consent didn't matter, because I already said no. My hands shook as I said it. 미안해, 나는 할 수 없어. I'm sorry, I can't do it. Girl, you don't even need to say sorry. Like, 미안해, just be like, no. But on the phone, she said there was silence. And then disbelief. My sister-in-law said, 왜? 언니 간호사인데 왜 안 돼? Why not? You're a nurse. Why won't you do it? Mrs. Kim said from that day on, everything changed. Her mother-in-law stopped calling her. And whenever they had family gatherings, They wouldn't even call her name. She would just say, 그 사람, that woman. At gatherings, her words grew sharper and sharper, and they were laced with disdain. And she would say stuff like, 요즘 며느리들은 가족도 안 챙겨. These days, daughter-in-laws don't even care to take care of their family. But then came the phone call that put the nail in the coffin. She said, her mother-in-law called and said, if you will not do postpartum care for your sister-in-law, then you need to give us $5,000 instead to pay for the postpartum care facility. Since you won't do it yourself, you need to be responsible for the payment. What? I'm dead. Like, the audacity of you to make it seem like it's her job. Your daughter also has a husband who has a mom-in-law. If you care so much about it, how about you call her mom-in-law and say, let's put in money for our grandkids' postnatal care? Why does it fall on the daughter-in-law? I'm done with these people. Mrs. Kim said she froze. You know, when you think about it, they weren't even going to pay her for it. It'd be different if they said, hey, my sister-in-law feels more comfortable with you than someone else. Can we pay you for you to take time off? So maybe you'll still be making the same amount of money, but we just want it to be you because we're more comfortable with you, but we're going to pay you. That's totally different. They just don't want to have to pay anything for this girl's postpartum stuff. Anyway, so Mrs. Kim said, Mother, isn't that too much? Why should I pay? Mom says, if you're family, then you should sacrifice for family. And I would have thrown the same thing back at her. I would have been like, well, that's your daughter. Why don't you sacrifice your own money for her? Huh? Mrs. Kim had had enough, so that night she had to fight with her husband until dawn. Her husband said, it's just $5,000, let's give it to her, and then she'll calm down. She said, I stared at him all numb. Why should I pay for your sister's postpartum recovery? He says, because she's family. That was the moment something inside me broke. Love, respect, patience, all of it crumbled under the weight of one word, family. But not only that, days later, they attended a family gathering, and right there in front of everyone, my mother-in-law said, my daughter-in-law doesn't care about family. She only thinks of herself. And then the relatives nodded and were like, yeah, that's how daughter-in-laws these days are. 요즘 며느리들 다 그래. Oh God, no, you don't have slaves anymore, basically, because as you guys know, historically in Korea, daughter-in-laws were sort of the lower ranked in the family. They were the slaves. They were the ones who were supposed to take on all the work that no one else wanted to do. And unfortunately, there are some old people still, people from the previous generation who still think that way. The daughter-in-law is meant to serve us. You're there to do the things that we don't want to do. And then they'll call them selfish for having boundaries and standing up to it. But in reality, they're being selfish because they don't want to do something. They want to put it onto someone else. Like, that is selfish. It's not the person who's saying no that's selfish. It's the person who's entitled to your time and your money that is being selfish, in my opinion. But Mrs. Kim said their words burned through her and she just wanted to disappear that night. Oh, Mrs. Kim says that night she cried in the bathroom quietly so no one could hear. She said, when did I become like this? I'm a nurse who stands tall in the hospital but cowers in her own family. She said the breaking point happened a few days later when a coworker asked her softly, 요즘 시댁이랑 힘들다면서요? I heard things were not going that well with your in-laws. My stomach dropped. Her coworker said she'd heard rumors because her mother-in-law has been going around and gossiping in the whole neighborhood, telling people that her nurse daughter-in-law refused to help them, calling me selfish, etc. Even her colleagues knew. She couldn't escape it. Oh, my earring back fell off. Then one day at work, one of the older nurses looked at me and said, you know, you should take legal action against them because you look exhausted. So if you don't know, in Korea, as we know, there's no-fault divorce. So if you get a divorce, you have to prove that your partner did something wrong. There's only 6 reasons for divorce, but one of them is mistreatment from the in-laws, from the family of origin. So the next day, she took half the day off and went to see a lawyer. And the lawyer, after listening to the story, of course said, yeah, your mother-in-law's demands are unjust. Being a daughter-in-law doesn't mean that you should sacrifice for stuff like that. So you definitely have a case here. We could process the divorce, get you in court, etc. Don't worry about it. I think in this case, it's needed because he doesn't care about her at all, right? He just wants to take care of the sister. She says after talking to the lawyer, something inside her shifted. For the first time, she realized that she had a right to say no. Yes, girl, yes, you do have a right to say no. You got to protect yourself, people. Mrs. Kim, because she needs to get evidence, started recording every call, the verbal abuse, the financial demands, my husband's indifference to everything. She built up evidence piece by piece, and slowly she found the strength to find her own voice again. One day, her mother-in-law called, screaming again about give us the $5 million now, or you're no longer going to be a family member. We're going to disown you, right? They're just trying to guilt and manipulate her into it. And so she replied, Mother, with a calm head, I am under no such obligation. If this continues, I'll take legal action. And for the first time, her mother-in-law was the one that was afraid. So that night she told her husband, she said, you know what? Let's just get a divorce. The husband begged, no, let's just move on. I'll talk to my mom. But at this point in time, it was too late. She said, I was done. Because she had all the evidence, the divorce went smoothly. The judge said, yes, this is an exploitation of a family member. But she said even in court, her mother-in-law argued to the very end. I cannot. In court, she was saying, 며느리가 간호사면 산후조리 해야 하는 거 아니야? If your daughter-in-law is a nurse, shouldn't she have to take care of the postnatal care? When the divorce was finalized, she packed her things and walked out. For the first time in years, she felt light. She moved into a small apartment that was closer to the hospital, and she finally felt at peace. And she says she feels so much more at ease and bright because she no longer lives to prove her worth to anyone. She lives knowing she already has it. Well, that's good because I've noticed that people who tend to allow people to walk all over them and feel guilty when they can't do someone's request, they tend to be people who don't really realize the value of themselves. So I'm glad that through this, she sort of learned to love herself and to find her voice and to say no when she has to. Of course, it doesn't mean you should live a selfish life and not help people. I think helping people is one of the things that does give life meaning. But obviously, in this situation, people are taking advantage of her, right? That goes above and beyond help. And it's not even help because they're not in a situation where it's not like they don't have money. They could pay for it themselves. They just want her to do it because they're taking advantage of her, right? Okay, so let's move on to the third story, and it is the weight of tradition. This one didn't have a name, so let's just call her Mrs. Lee. So Mrs. Lee said, they say the hardest battles a woman fight are often inside her own family. In my case, it wasn't strangers or circumstances that almost cost me everything. It was tradition. She says, it was early morning when my mother called. Her voice trembled through the phone. Sweetheart, your due date is on Lunar New Year and Solar. How can you possibly go to your in-laws' house? She was right. My due date was just days away. Solar, Lunar New Year, is the busiest holiday of the year. But my mother-in-law had already called too, insisting that I come down early to help prepare for the ancestral rites that we do on Solar, to prepare the ancestral table on my due date on Solar. And it's not like it's just like right down the street, right? She said it wasn't just far. It was hours of driving across provinces. Here's the thing that you have to know. In Korea, on the holidays, you can't drive anywhere. Like there is so much traffic going and coming because most people go from Seoul down to the countryside for Solar. You will be stuck in a place of highway for 4+ hours sometimes, depending on where you're going. And trips often triple in length. Yeah, triple, not double, triple. So without traffic, if it's a 2-hour drive, it's gonna be around 6 hours because you're gonna be stuck in that traffic. It is insane, I'm not even joking. Even just within Seoul, like when we go to my in-laws, it usually takes 50 minutes to get there. But when we go during traffic after the holidays, it takes 3+ hours. So if you're a pregnant woman, just imagine you're stuck in the car, you can't go anywhere for 6 hours. And like, let's say you go into labor or something, like that's not a good situation, especially because sometimes when people go into birth, they have health problems that require emergency assistance, but you won't be able to get that. So not only is it a dangerous situation because you're going to be stuck in the car for hours either way, and I'm talking like gridlocked, not moving at all. But then you have to go there and be working from the butt crack of dawn, cooking and preparing these food on the table. That's a lot of strain on your body. Let me tell you, when I was in the last stretch of pregnancy, let alone getting close to the due date, I didn't even want to cook my own damn food, let alone go and prepare all this food for an ancestral rites ceremony for ancestors that aren't even mine. But she said my husband sighed when I protested to him, who's driving? Me. You don't have to drive, just sit in the car comfortably. But I'm just thinking, if that makes it okay, how does that make it okay? I muttered, what if the baby comes early? What if something happens on the road? He just shrugged. Mom says that when you have daughters, they usually will come late anyway, right? So the chances of her coming on the due date are slim, right? She'll probably come afterward, so it should be fine. So I told him that's not how it works. But he had already tuned me out. He was scrolling through his phone. And on Lunar New Year, despite everything, I ended up going because my husband said quietly, if you don't go, my mom's gonna blame me. Okay, so he's worried about getting in trouble. Like, how old are you that you're worried about getting in trouble with your mom or your mom yelling at you? Like, so what? Let her yell. Just hang up the phone. Or you go by yourself and you help out with the table, you know? After the long, grueling drive, when they arrived at the mother-in-law's house, she greeted them like nothing was wrong. Oh, you must be tired from the drive. Are you hungry? But before I could answer, she barked. What are you doing just standing there? Your husband's hungry. Get some soup ready. Oh, no. See, this is not the kind of family you need to marry into in Korea. That's why I say you always got to find out how traditional are the parents. And if they are traditional, you need to find out what does your husband think about it. Because even they can think if they want to think, right? As long as your husband doesn't think that and will push back and you guys will just do whatever's best for you, then it's fine. Get your husband some soup. So Mrs. Lee said, I forced a smile. Right now? Can I rest for a bit first? And she said, did your mother teach you to talk back to elders like that? And my husband said nothing. He just went and sat down on the couch. She said, I bit my lip and said quietly, 알겠어요. 지금 차릴게요. Yes, mother. I'll get it ready. But by mid-morning, my back was on fire. Of course, this is your due date. God, she said every step sent pain shooting down my legs, but the kitchen didn't stop. My mother-in-law kept muttering under her breath, wait till you're my age. You will see how hard it is to breathe. Whenever I paused to hold my belly, she would snap, always with the excuses, move faster. But Mrs. Lee said she was getting dizzy and the smell of food made her nauseous. But when I asked my husband for help, she would glare and snap in. Men don't belong in the kitchen. Her son, my husband, stayed seated in front of the TV, scrolling on his phone yet again. But Mrs. Lee said, I thought of my baby kicking in my stomach, and I wanted to lie down just for a minute. But before I could, the room tilted, and the next thing I can remember, someone was screaming, she's still not finished yet. So as she's fainting, they're complaining that she's working too slow. Then Mrs. Lee said, then there was darkness. When I woke up, there was an ambulance. Lights were flashing red and white. Honey, you're in an ambulance. My husband's voice was trembling. And at the hospital, everything moved in a blur. Doctors were shouting, nurses were rushing. Later, one of them said softly, if you'd come any later, both the mother and baby would have been in serious danger. So tears slid down my cheeks. I wasn't crying from fear anymore. It was fury. Because not only the physical labor, I think the mental labor is what causes more problems on the body, right? Like if she was going there because she really wanted to help and she was so positive and she loves being with family and they were just there, everyone's helping her and it was a good, positive family environment, I think the physical labor wouldn't be as bad. But going there knowing that your husband doesn't give a about you, that your mom-in-law doesn't give a about you, and people in that family just expect you to be a slave, that right there would be the worst mental load. You know what I mean? Like the amount of negative feelings that she must have has got to be insane. She said when she finally woke in recovery, she heard her husband arguing in the hallway with his mom. You get ready to sign the divorce papers, is all she heard. Then my father-in-law spoke up for the first time and said, if she married into the family, isn't it natural to help during the holidays? You know, your wife and your baby are both fine now, aren't they? But then her mother was also at the hospital, and her mother said, do you think marriage is child's play? You cared more about a table of food than your own daughter-in-law's life. So Mrs. Kim said, when I was discharged, I tried to go home to our small apartment, to the one we'd built together, but the keypad didn't work. The code had been changed. You know, when you go to type in the password, it beeps. So it's like beep, 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 beep. And then when it's wrong, it goes like deet, deet, deet. So people inside could hear that someone trying to get in. So then Mrs. Lee hears a voice from inside. It's her mother-in-law's voice. I changed the password. I paid for this house, didn't I? Any problem? And her husband was inside and he did not open the door either. So her husband just stayed silent and let the wife who just gave birth with the baby be put outside because the mom is mad because she passed out while preparing for the ancestral rites and didn't get to finish it, basically is what I'm understanding. Wow. So Mrs. Lee said through the door, she said, if you're a man, start earning something. You've been unemployed for a year. You can start by paying child support when your daughter grows up. She said, I felt something close inside me for good. The love, the marriage, the patience, gone. So she said during the divorce proceedings, there wasn't much to argue about. He didn't really fight anything, probably because he was too ashamed. And so she said her and her daughter moved in with her own mother. At night, she'd watch her daughter sleep, her tiny little chest rising and falling, and she'd think, she almost never got to breathe. Wow, that's a pretty heavy one. That's true. She said, in Korea, we grow up hearing, you must sacrifice for family. But that word, it's been twisted for too long. It shouldn't mean to erase yourself. Tradition should preserve life, not destroy it. And now, as I watch my daughter's small hand curl around mine, I finally understand what real legacy means. Not duty, not endurance, but love that chooses life. Aww. What did you guys think about these stories today? Do you have any experience with anything like this? Have you ever heard anything like this? If you did, were you able to get out of it? What gave you the strength to get out of it? And let's give words to people down below who are in situations where people don't seem to care about them and they seem to be stuck and unable to get out and find happiness. I want everyone to just be happy in life. So please get the strength that you need. If your people around you are not giving you that strength, find some positive people who can help encourage you, help you to find your voice, stand up for yourself, and live the happy life that you deserve to live. Because living around people like this who are so negative and so hateful, I think it is hateful. Because I think if you truly love someone, you'd be able to see situations for how they are, and everyone would be caring for everyone instead of forcing these sort of rules and expectations and regulations on everyone all the time, right? Everyone, just love everyone. Just love as much as you can. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like this video and you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe to my YouTube page, which is down below. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, like me on Facebook, and I will see ya.